Welcome back, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. This is Real Big Ten Talk +1 with Chris. I am Chris. Welcome to Week 9 of the 2018 college football season. And this is, as the highlighted +1 illustrates, our +1 matchup of the week. This is outside of the Big Ten. This is our high-profile non-conference affair. Really the biggest high-profile non-conference affair of this week that I saw out of any game this weekend. Featuring none other than, that's it, that's right, the world's largest cocktail party, unofficially named, of course. It is the number 9 Florida Gators, 6-1, 4-1 in SEC play, playing the number 7 Georgia Bulldogs, 6-1 also, and 4-1 also in SEC play. This is one heck of a good rivalry game. Always full of fireworks, bad blood between the fans, the players, everybody. This is a game that these two teams love to hate each other in. This will be a very interesting game. Looking forward at who these two teams have played. Not great to open up the season. I mean, Florida played Charleston Southern, who I don't really know anything about. Same way with Georgia playing Austin Peay. Both teams look dominant in those two victories, but they are against FCS opponents. It's one thing I don't like about the SEC for the most part. Now, outside of Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M, of course, most SEC teams play FCS opponents in their first game. I don't understand this. In my opinion, you should want to play higher profile non-conference opponents to get yourselves battle tested for the SEC season. I don't really understand why so many SEC teams don't challenge themselves in the non-conference. Georgia's a big example of a good quality SEC team that doesn't play good out-of-conference games. They haven't for many years, outside of course, Georgia Tech, but that's their rival. It'd be like if Michigan didn't play Ohio State at the end of the year. I mean, Georgia plays Georgia Tech at the end of the year. It's just the way it is. But same with Florida and Florida State. But outside of those two non-conference, pretty much almost given games, they don't play really anybody. I mean, Florida a few years ago played Michigan, and I was impressed that they scheduled Michigan. They lost, but it was a good non-conference opponent. But that's it. And Florida and Georgia they just don't play great out-of-conference games, and it's unfortunate because I think what can I say? I would love to see the SEC Big Ten Challenge, for example, in football, like they do in basketball. I think it would be a very interesting, awesome event. And if the SEC and the Big Ten could get together and do that, I would love that. Even just one game, even just 1 week. We'd say week 2. The Big Ten and the SEC, every team from the SEC and the Big Ten play each other. You could say Georgia and Michigan, Florida and Ohio State, Michigan State and Texas A&M. I think it would be a very interesting event, but that's neither here nor there. I apologize. Again, getting on my soapbox. Let's move forward. Florida. The reason why I have that Kentucky game as a red. It's not like Kentucky isn't a good opponent. For God's sakes, they're 6-1 right now. But it was the way Florida looked in that game, and I watched that game. Florida looked weak in that game against Kentucky. It's like they weren't even there mentally. I mean, they lost to Kentucky in Gainesville, for crying out loud. The first time since, I think it was 75. And after that loss, I thought, as like most of the country thought, Florida was going to it was going to be a bad year for Florida and a mediocre year for Kentucky. We all have been wrong. Florida and Kentucky have both played excellent as of late. Both are 6-1, so it wasn't a bad loss. Ranking-wise, it was just a bad loss because of the way that Florida looked in that game. They gave Kentucky too many chances because both offenses didn't look great, but Kentucky finally took control of that game and did end up winning. Colorado State, a good win. I mean, Mountain West opponent, but at least it's not an FCS opponent. The Rams aren't a great team this year, but it was a good, dominant win for Florida, 48-10. Good win. At Tennessee, the Volunteers, 47-21. The Volunteers are not a great offense this year. Florida gave up 21 points to a pretty lousy Tennessee offense. No offense, Volunteers, you're not a bad team, but you don't have a great offense. But you are in a downtrodden year. But that's to be expected after losing Butch Jones last year at the end of the year. Then at Mississippi State, a very impressive victory in Starkville. Mississippi State's not a bad team, but they just aren't quite strong enough to compete with some of the heavy hitters of the SEC, and their record has shown that. Florida, what did they do to follow that up with? They beat a number 5 ranked LSU Tiger team that has turned out to be a very impressive team as of late. Of course, beating Georgia 2 weeks ago. And then Florida did beat the Commodores last weekend, but it was not a great win. Florida should have hammered that Vanderbilt team, and they didn't. Vanderbilt was in the game most of the game. Florida only pulled away late. After all the turmoil with the coaches getting into that heated debate, after the whole extracurricular with the Florida kid the Vanderbilt kid hitting the Florida kid late out of bounds, whatever it was. I can't remember who did what, but it was a bad-looking victory. That's why I have it in yellow. For Georgia, you still haven't really been battle-tested much. And I said that 2 weeks ago before you played LSU. You hadn't been battle-tested enough. Missouri, not a bad win. Austin Peay, you shut him out. That's good, but still an FCS opponent. South Carolina, they're not as good as we thought. They were 24 ranked at the time. You crushed them in Columbia. That's impressive, but they're not even ranked anymore, and I believe they're 3-3. Not a great win after the fact, but still, you only held them to 17 points. Why I give it a green win. Middle Tennessee State, another dominant victory. At Missouri, a good 4-3 Missouri team. In fact, that will be Georgia's marquee win that we'll look at here in a little bit. Against Tennessee, good win, 38-12. Only give up 12 points to a Tennessee team that has a decent defense, and you still put 38 points on them. That's good. That same Vanderbilt team that Florida struggled with last week, Georgia hammered that team 3 weeks ago, 41-13. Now the LSU game. A lot of people probably are asking themselves, and especially Georgia Bulldog fans, what happened? Well, I think what happened was Georgia got lulled into a false sense of security. They had been dominant those first 6 games of the year. But I think when you're so dominant, you get complacent. When you actually go out and play a good, quality opponent with a good defense, such as LSU, you expect to win. You go in expecting to win. Well, that can be fine if you're a weaker opponent, and that's confidence. That's believing you can beat a superior opponent. Georgia was the superior opponent. When you go into a game like that playing an inferior opponent and you expect to win, that's when the trouble happens. That's when you start to get too complacent, too arrogant, and you make mistakes. That's what happened in that game. It's like Georgia wasn't even there mentally until they realized, oh, wow, we're down. We need to start playing some football now. LSU's such a good defense. Georgia's offense couldn't keep up. And just LSU beat them because Georgia just couldn't get anything going. They got away from the run too early. And I thought their running game was pretty decent to start, but for some reason they stopped running and just kept passing. And I didn't understand that, and I think that was a big reason why they lost that game. They got away from the run too early. For Florida, that LSU victory, we'll look at that in a minute. That was a very impressive victory against a high-quality opponent. This is going to be a tough game for both teams. Both teams want this victory. Florida wants to legitimize themselves. They want to show that the LSU win wasn't just a fluke. And Georgia wants to showcase that that LSU loss was a fluke. They are as good as we thought earlier in the year. Georgia's going to come out angry, and they better. The last 5 meetings between these two. Florida has owned the last 5, but Georgia did hammer Florida last year, 42-7. on their way to a national championship berth. That, of course, we know what happened with that. I don't need to go into that here. In 2016, the 14th ranked Florida beat Georgia 24-10. Year before that, 27-3. Year before that, 38-20. And then 2013, Georgia barely edged Florida there, 23-20. The first time neither team was ranked in this matchup also. So, looking at Florida's marquee win, as we just touched on, that LSU game, why did LSU lose this game? Well, honestly, you can look at two things here. LSU lost the third down efficiency battle, as I've said before. There are three phases you can look at to determine, statistically speaking, why a team wins or loses. If you lose a turnover battle, that's a hit against you. You lose the amount, you commit too many penalties. That's 2. And when I say too many penalties, I mean 6 or more. LSU committed 8. So that's 2. Third down efficiency, if you lose that one, that's 3. LSU struggled in all 3 phases, although Florida also had too many penalties. LSU committed 3 turnovers, only converted 23.5% of their third downs. They gave up 215 rushing yards to Florida, so that's not controlling the line of scrimmage. They had 180 yards of rushing, that's good, and doesn't look good for Florida, but they gave up 215 rushing yards to Florida. They made a substandard Florida passing attack look decent, giving up 176 passing yards did that LSU team. Also, Joe Burrow looked inexperienced, to say the least, as a senior, going for 19 of 34 passing, 0 touchdowns and 2 picks thrown. Both teams held onto the ball for about the same amount of time, so you can't look at the time of a possession. Or the total first downs, 20-19. But LSU lost this game because they couldn't convert on third down, they turned the ball over too much, and they had too many penalties. You have all 3 of those phases going against you, you're going to lose. Game over. That's why Florida won. Florida took advantage of the miscues. Florida's not a horrible team. They took advantage of LSU's mistakes. Game over. Florida won. And it was in the swamp. And of course, as we all know, Florida plays they have one more gear when they're playing against their home fans. So Florida won because they took advantage of LSU's miscues in this game. For Georgia, we're going to look at the Missouri win because that was the one win Georgia has against a pretty decent opponent. Not great, but decent at 4-3. And Georgia looked pretty impressive in this game. Not third down efficiency-wise, but they only committed 1 turnover, had 7 penalties, not great. But they forced 3 turnovers. They had 445 total yards. They looked balanced on offense. 260 yards passing, 185 yards rushing. 3 touchdowns to 1 interception Jake Fromm had. 13 of 23 passing, not great, but still over 50%. Missouri, well, like I said, both teams were bad on third down efficiency. But Missouri committed 3 turnovers. Only had 5 penalties, but Missouri did still struggle in 2 phases. Their lack of third down efficiency, and they turned the ball over too much. That's why they lost. You turn the ball over 3 times in a game, you're going to lose that game quite often, more than 50% of the time. You commit 3 turnovers and you get less than 30% third down efficiency, I'd say that chance of losing goes up to 70%. The only 5 penalties was the only good part about Missouri in that game. And they controlled the line of scrimmage on offense, gained 172 yards on the ground. That's impressive. But they gave up 185 yards rushing. They allowed Georgia to be balanced, and that's why they lost. You as a defense allow an offense to be balanced, being able to be effective both throwing and passing, then what do? What can you do? You get beat. That's what you do. You get beat when you allow an offense to beat you both running the ball and throwing. So Missouri lost because they couldn't control the line of scrimmage on defense, turned the ball over 3 times on offense, and couldn't convert on third down. Boom. That's why they lost. Now, rushing, Florida does a pretty good job of rushing, 197.3 yards per game. That's 39th nationally. Georgia also runs the ball very effectively at 226.3 yards per game. That's 22nd. Georgia has not played a great schedule, but they've done a good job at dominating the teams that they have played, and it shows in the stat sheet. Rushing yards allowed. Both teams struggle against the run. Florida more than Georgia at 163.1 yards per game. That's 73rd nationally. Whereas Georgia gives up 136.3 yards per game on average. That's 40th nationally. Neither one is great, but Georgia definitely holds the advantage over in the rushing and rushing defense department. Looking at passing, Florida is just plain bad as far as efficiency goes. 58% completion percentage. That is 86th nationally. 211 yards per game is all they get. That's 90th nationally. What Florida does do well in the passing game is they defend the pass very well at 160.1 yards per game. That is 6th nationally. But Florida has not gone up against great passing offenses, so it shows. The only decent offense they played against was LSU. I can't count Kentucky because Kentucky's not a great offense. In fact, I believe Kentucky scored a defensive touchdown in that game. And Florida's done a good job of protecting the quarterback. Only 9 sacks allowed this year. That is 19th nationally. Just over a sack allowed per game is not bad. Georgia, excellent on completion percentage at 67.6% per game. That is 14th nationally. But Georgia does struggle a little bit as far as getting passing yards per game at 235.6 yards per game. That is 64th nationally. Not horrible, but not great. Right in the middle of the pack, really. Georgia has given up 12 sacks this year. That is 43rd nationally. Again, just over 1 per game. But you don't want Jake Fromm to be knocked around the field too much. And Georgia has also done well at pass defense at 174.3 yards per game given up. That is 15th nationally. Both teams defend the pass very well. Looking at offensive efficiency, Florida also struggles in this department. Only holding to the ball 29 minutes per game on average. That's rough when you only have the ball on average less than half the game. Both teams are pretty good at average starting field position. Florida starts at their own 36 on average, whereas Georgia starts on their own 32. Both teams do pretty well in that department. Third down efficiency, both teams are okay. Florida has the slight disadvantage at only 41.4% per game. That's 49th nationally. Georgia does do well in that department, 45.7%. That is 21st nationally. Turnovers lost, Florida struggles a little bit at giving up 9 this year. Georgia has done well at only 7. That is 1 per game on average for Georgia. For Florida, it's just over 1 per game on average. Neither one is bad, but always room for improvement. Red zone touchdown percentage. What red zone touchdown percentage for Florida? 58.6% of the time is when they score touchdowns inside the red zone. That's not going to do it against a good, explosive offense that you're facing in Georgia, Florida. Now, red zone scoring percentage is pretty good at 89.7%. That's 26th nationally. But what does that tell me, Florida? You sell for 3 points too much inside the 20. You've got to convert and get touchdowns more often inside the red zone. Penalties! 8 per game. You commit on average, Florida, at 71 penalty yards you give up per game that you can't use. Those 71 penalty yards can extend drives if you're on defense. They can shut drives down if you're on offense. You're consistently putting yourselves in second and third and longs from just self-imposed mistakes or penalties. For Georgia, red zone touchdown percentage, not bad at 67.8%. Not great, but not bad. You do score 89.3% of the time inside the 20. That's 27th nationally. But both teams do settle for field goals too often inside the 20, where you need to convert more and get more touchdowns. Average penalties committed per game for Georgia, 6.2. That's not horrible, but not great. You want to try to get that under 6. And average penalty yards per game for Georgia, 54.57. That's not going to kill you, but depending on what point of the game you commit those penalties is what can, for lack of better words. Not horrible, but not great. You want to get that number down to at least below 6, Georgia. Defensive splits. Georgia does struggle defensively statistically. Florida, very good. 18 turnovers gained, 7 interceptions, 11 turnovers recovered, 21 sacks. That is 18th nationally for Florida. They do a good job getting after the quarterback. Total defense, again, Florida, very impressive. 323.3 yards per game. That is 22nd nationally. In fact, Georgia is also very stout on defense in total. 310.6 yards per game. That is 17th nationally for the Bulldogs. Net punting, Florida does exceptionally well. 40.48 yards of net, on average, net punting. That is 25th nationally. That is winning the field position battle if you can do that on a week-to-week basis. Turnover margin, excellent for Florida at +9. That is 7th nationally. That is not beating yourself by turning the ball over. That is an excellent job by Florida. Georgia, turnovers gained, 9. Not very good. Only 4 picks you've caught this year. 9 sacks is 115th nationally. You've got to do a better job of rushing the quarterback, Georgia. Net punting, not great at 37.25 yards per game. That's 75th nationally, Georgia. Turnover margin, +2. Anytime you can get over 0, I give you the green font because that is impressive to be better than 0. Or, yeah, it's better. It's good to be plus something in the turnover margin. That helps you win games. Not turning the ball over and forcing turnovers can help you win games. And that turnover margin rank is 43rd nationally at +2 for the Dogs. Neat little tidbits. These teams have played each other for the first time in 1915. Georgia won that matchup 37-0. The rivalry is, as I've already said, unofficially named the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. The unofficial nickname of this rivalry was coined in 1950 by sports editor for the Florida Times-Union, Bill Castells. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. Teams have played each other every year since 1944. Georgia does hold the slightest edge in this evenly matched series at 50, 43, and 2 all the time. The game has been played in Jacksonville, Florida every year since 1995 when it was played in Athens, Georgia. What does each team need to do to win the game? For Florida, you'll win if you limit the penalties. You have to still play aggressive, but not too much. Too much aggression causes the little yellow beanbags to be thrown from the referee, which you get too much of this year, Florida. You have to force Georgia into being a pass-heavy team. Jake Fromm did struggle with accuracy against the only other good defense he faced, LSU. You are more battle-tested than Georgia, so play relaxed, Florida. You've been here before, you've done it before, and you've won. You have to remember that, playing a tough, good Georgia team. You played tough, good teams before. Do I need to remind everybody that you did beat LSU? You can't sell for 3 inside the 20, Florida. Have to get 6 more often than not. Can't turn the ball over, and you have to protect Felipe Franks. And you have to hit Jake Fromm like you've done most of the year. You've done a good job of hitting quarterbacks. You have to hit Jake Fromm, force him into making mistakes, and take advantage of it. You're a very opportunistic defense, Florida. You have to be against a team like Georgia. You have to shut down that explosive offense of theirs and keep your offense on the field and keep Georgia's defense on it as well. For Georgia, play angry. You just got soundly beaten against LSU. You know what everybody's saying around the country? You're not good enough, Georgia. You can't compete against the good teams in the SEC. You're weak. You have to use that as locker room material to get yourself ready for this game. You have to establish the passing game early in order to use your powerful rushing attack. Since you're going up against an excellent rushing defense, you must be able to show you can pass to prevent Florida from loading the box. You have to play focused. You have the better offense going up against a weak offense. Force turnovers and get some sacks, Georgia. You've done a horrible job at both. You have to be an opportunistic defense. You're playing a weak offense. You need to take advantage of that. You've got to play clean games since you have struggled with penalties yourselves, Georgia. And you have to convert on third down to demoralize a talented defense. Keep them on the field. Now, who to pick? I've touched on a lot of things in this episode. Both teams struggle in certain aspects. Both teams excel in others. But every time I've seen a good defense but with a weak offense, that team struggles against good quality opponents. Georgia has a decent defense but an explosive offense. So, I am picking Georgia 31-17 for one big reason. Georgia is angry. They have to be furious at how they played against LSU. They weren't focused going into the game, and it showed. Their minds just weren't in it. It's like they expected to win, and they didn't. You know what they're going to be thinking about when they go into this game? I'm angry. I want to beat this Florida team into submission because I want to show them the Georgia team of last year. I'm going to make a statement in this game. I'm going to score as many points as I can. And they're going to against a weak offense. Georgia's defense won't have to struggle against an inferior Florida offense. Florida's defense is good, but they haven't played an explosive offense such as Georgia yet this year. And they will struggle. Georgia will beat this team, be right back in the national championship conversation. It will be an excellent win for Georgia, and it will be a much-needed win for Georgia against a quality ranked opponent. That is it for my +1 matchup. Please like, subscribe, or share with your friends if you do like this video. Please hit the thumbs down if you didn't like this video and let me know why in the comments so I can enhance your viewing experience. I'm looking forward to this game. Enjoy the games this weekend, guys, and until next time.